What if everything you've been told about freedom was a carefully crafted lie? What if the very thoughts racing through your mind right now, the emotions stirring in your chest, the desires pulling you forward, were never truly yours at all? For over a century, one name has been whispered in occult circles with equal parts reverence and fear: Helena Blavatsky, the woman who dared to unveil what ancient mystery schools had hidden for millennia. The woman who discovered the one method the Archons fear above all else. They've told you that you're free to choose, to think, to believe. But what if that freedom itself was the greatest illusion ever constructed? What if the invisible architects of this world, those ancient powers the Gnostics called the Archons, have been feeding on your consciousness since the moment you were born? Blavatsky knew something extraordinary. She uncovered an ancient technique so powerful, so transformative, that it could shatter the very foundations of archontic control. This wasn't philosophy. This wasn't theory. This was a living practice that could liberate the human soul from invisible chains that most people never even see. The Archons don't fear your anger. They don't fear your rebellion. They fear one thing above all: that you'll discover what Blavatsky found hidden in the ancient texts of Tibet, Egypt, and forgotten civilizations. A method so simple yet so profound that once you understand it, their power over you dissolves like morning mist in sunlight. This isn't another conspiracy theory. This is the conspiracy of consciousness itself. If you're enjoying this journey into forbidden knowledge, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. It helps tremendously in continuing to bring content like this that challenges the very fabric of reality. In 1831, a child was born in Ukraine who would shake the foundations of Western spirituality. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky wasn't just a mystic or a philosopher. She was a revolutionary of consciousness, a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern understanding. From her earliest years, she claimed to see beyond the material world, perceiving layers of reality that others couldn't access. But unlike the spiritualists and mediums of her time who spoke to the dead, Blavatsky was after something far more dangerous: the living truth about human consciousness and the forces that control it. Her journey reads like an epic adventure. She traveled to Egypt, India, Tibet, and across Europe, seeking out hidden masters, secret schools, and forbidden texts. She studied with Kabbalists in Cairo, Buddhist monks in Ceylon, and mysterious adepts in the mountains of Tibet. But she wasn't collecting stories or accumulating knowledge for its own sake. She was hunting for a pattern, a thread that connected all ancient teachings about human liberation. What she discovered would terrify the established religious and political orders of her time. In 1875, Blavatsky founded the Theosophical Society in New York, and shortly after, she published her groundbreaking work, Isis Unveiled. This wasn't a gentle, spiritual book filled with comforting platitudes. It was an explosive revelation that tore away the veil hiding humanity's true condition. She spoke of hierarchies of spiritual beings, of humanity's divine origin, and most controversially, of parasitic forces that feed on human consciousness, forces that ancient Gnostics had called the Archons. The Archons, according to Blavatsky's synthesis of ancient wisdom, weren't mythological demons or religious metaphors. They were real forces operating in dimensions of consciousness that most humans never perceive. They represented distorted emanations, cosmic errors that had become self-perpetuating patterns of control. These entities didn't rule through physical force. They ruled through illusion, through the manipulation of perception itself. They convinced humanity that the prison was paradise, that limitation was natural, that spiritual amnesia was normal. But here's what made Blavatsky's work truly revolutionary. She didn't just describe the problem, she revealed the solution. Hidden within her complex writings, scattered across thousands of pages, encoded in symbols and allegories, was a practical method. A technique that could break archontic influence not through ritual or belief, but through a transformation of consciousness itself. This method had been preserved in mystery schools for thousands of years, taught only to initiates who had proven themselves ready. The establishment tried to destroy her. They called her a fraud, a charlatan, a madwoman. Religious institutions denounced her, scientific materialists mocked her, but they couldn't suppress what she had unleashed, the idea that human consciousness could transcend its programming, that the soul could remember its divine origin, and that this remembering was the ultimate act of liberation. Blavatsky's work was dangerous because it placed spiritual power back into individual hands. It suggested that no external authority, no priest, no institution could stand between you and direct knowledge of the divine. Her key insight was this: the Archons maintain control through ignorance, not through strength. They create layers of false reality, distorted perceptions, and inverted truths that keep consciousness trapped in reactive patterns. But consciousness itself, when awakened to its true nature, possesses an inherent power that archontic forces cannot touch. This power isn't gained through practice or development. It's remembered. It's the recognition of what you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning and illusion. From which city in the United States are you watching? Or from which country in the world is this content reaching you? Leave it in the comments, I really want to know. To understand Blavatsky's method, we must first comprehend what we're actually facing. The Archons don't exist in the way most people imagine evil or darkness. They're not hiding in shadows waiting to attack. They're woven into the very fabric of how you perceive reality. Think of them as distortion filters placed over consciousness itself, bending and warping your perception so subtly that you mistake the distortion for truth. In Gnostic cosmology, which Blavatsky studied intensely, the Archons emerged when divine light first descended into matter. They represent the crystallization of error, the petrification of consciousness into rigid patterns. The Gnostic text, the hypostasis of the Archons, describes them as rulers who did not know their limit, beings who mistook themselves for gods and sought to keep humanity imprisoned in ignorance. But here's the crucial insight that most people miss. The Archons aren't separate from human consciousness, they operate through it. Every time you react without awareness, every time fear grips you unconsciously, every time you identify completely with a thought or emotion, you're feeding the archontic pattern. They don't need to control you directly. They've created a system that makes you control yourself. Through social conditioning, through collective beliefs, through the constant noise of media and distraction, they've built a prison where the inmates police themselves. The bars are made of attention. The locks are forged from habitual reaction. Blavatsky discovered this through her study of Eastern philosophy, particularly Buddhist and Hindu teachings about Maya, the illusion of separate existence. She realized that what the East called Maya and what the Gnostics called archontic deception were describing the same phenomenon, the misidentification of consciousness with its contents. You are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions, you are not even your sense of individual self. You are the awareness in which all of these arise, but the Archons have convinced you otherwise. This is their first and greatest trick, making you believe you are the character in the story rather than the consciousness reading it. Once you identify completely with the role, with the personality, with the endless stream of mental and emotional content, you're caught. Because then every threat to that constructed identity feels like a threat to your very existence. Fear becomes automatic. Defense becomes constant. And in that state of perpetual reactivity, you generate the very energy that feeds archontic influence. Imagine a parasite that doesn't steal your food, but instead makes you crave poison. That's closer to how archontic forces operate. They don't drain your energy directly. They manipulate your consciousness into patterns that deplete you while generating emotional and mental turbulence. Anxiety, anger, despair, obsessive desire, these states create ripples in consciousness that archontic patterns feed upon, not because they're evil entities with malicious intent, but because that's simply what they are, self-perpetuating distortions that require reactive consciousness to sustain themselves. But Blavatsky found the crack in their armor. She discovered that the Archons have one fatal weakness, one vulnerability they cannot overcome, and that weakness is remarkably simple. They cannot withstand direct observation. They exist only in unconsciousness, in the gaps of awareness where you're lost in identification. The moment you observe a pattern without identifying with it, the moment you witness a thought without believing you are that thought, the archontic influence begins to dissolve. This observation isn't passive. It's the most powerful force in consciousness. The ancient texts she studied spoke of the light that the Archons cannot imitate. This wasn't mystical metaphor. It was precise phenomenological description of what happens when awareness turns back on itself, when consciousness becomes conscious of itself, In that moment of pure witnessing, something extraordinary occurs. If this is making sense to you, comment below with your thoughts and share this video. This knowledge needs to spread. Every spiritual tradition on earth, when you strip away the cultural clothing and religious dogma, points to the same essential truth. Within the human being exists something uncreated, something that predates the material world itself. The Gnostics called it the divine spark. Buddhists speak of Buddha nature. Hindus refer to Atman. Christian mystics named it the Christ within. Blavatsky synthesized these traditions and revealed their common core. Consciousness itself is the divine element, and it cannot be corrupted, controlled, or destroyed by any force in the material universe. This is radically different from most religious teachings. The Archontic influence has infiltrated even spiritual traditions, twisting them into systems of external authority and control. You're told you need to be saved, redeemed, or purified by something outside yourself. You're taught that you're broken, sinful, or incomplete. These teachings serve the Archontic pattern perfectly because they keep you looking outward, seeking, striving, never recognizing the completeness that's already present. Blavatsky's revolution was recognizing that spiritual development isn't about gaining something new. It's about removing the obscurations that hide what you've always been. Imagine a lamp covered with layers of dust and grime. The light within never diminished. It was simply hidden. The Archons didn't steal your power. They convinced you that you never had it. They piled layers of false identity, limiting beliefs, and reactive patterns over your consciousness until you forgot the radiance at your core. This changes everything about spiritual practice. You're not trying to become enlightened. You're recognizing the awareness that's already fully awake. You're not fighting darkness. You're noticing that darkness is simply the absence of your attention. When you truly grasp this, when it moves from intellectual concept to lived reality, the entire game changes. The Archons lose their grip because their grip was always based on a lie. The lie that you are weak, limited, and separate from the source of all power. Consider your own experience right now. You're reading these words, but what is it that's reading? Is it your thoughts? No, because you can observe your thoughts. Is it your emotions? No, because you can feel emotions come and go. Is it your body? No, because you're aware of bodily sensations. There's something prior to all of these, something that witnesses all content without being any of it. That witnessing presence is what you truly are. It's indestructible, eternal, and free. It always has been. The Archons create endless distractions to keep you from noticing this simple fact. They flood consciousness with content, problems to solve, desires to fulfill, fears to manage, identities to maintain. The content itself isn't the issue. The issue is complete identification with it, the forgetting of the witnessing presence. Blavatsky's method brings you back to this presence again and again until the recognition stabilizes, until you can no longer be fooled by the Archontic illusion because you've seen through it completely. There comes a moment in every awakening when the illusion cracks. Not gradually, not through years of practice, but suddenly. Like a gestalt shift, where you suddenly see the hidden image in an optical illusion. Consciousness suddenly recognizes itself. Blavatsky called this moment the turning of the key. The Buddhists call it stream entry. The Gnostics called it receiving the light. Whatever name it goes by, it's the instant when you realize beyond all doubt that you are not who you thought you were. This realization is both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because you suddenly feel the weight of false identity falling away. Terrifying because it reveals how deeply you've been asleep, how much of your life has been lived in reactive unconsciousness, how thoroughly the Archontic illusion had convinced you that the prison was home. It's the red pill moment, the point of no return. Once you see it, you can never fully go back to sleep, though the Archons will certainly try to lull you back into comfortable unconsciousness. The contrast becomes stark. On one side, the world of endless seeking, perpetual dissatisfaction, reactive emotion, and mental turbulence. The Archontic realm where you're always trying to get somewhere, become someone, fix something, prove something. It's exhausting because it's fundamentally built on lack, on the lie that you're incomplete. On the other side, the recognition of wholeness, of already being what you've been seeking, of consciousness that needs nothing, fears nothing, because it is everything. Blavatsky experienced this turning point during her time in Tibet. After years of seeking, studying, and striving, she encountered a master who asked her one simple question: who is seeking? That question shattered her conceptual framework. The seeker itself was part of the illusion. The one trying to become enlightened was the very obstacle to enlightenment. In that moment of confusion, when her mind couldn't formulate an answer, awareness revealed itself. The witness that had been present all along, obscured by the endless activity of seeking. This is the punchline that the Archons hide at all costs. You're already free. You've always been free. The search for freedom is what maintains bondage. The Archons don't imprison you with external chains. They convince you to imprison yourself through the belief that you need to escape. They set you on endless spiritual journeys, collecting practices and accumulating knowledge, always moving towards some future liberation that's actually present right now. When this recognition dawns, something alchemical happens. The energy that was powering the archontic pattern suddenly becomes available for consciousness itself. The fear that was keeping you controlled transforms into presence. The desire that was pulling you into distraction becomes the fuel for awareness. Every negative emotion, every challenging circumstance, every moment of suffering reveals itself as an invitation to remember what you are. The Archons cannot survive this recognition, not because you've defeated them, but because you've seen through them. A mirage doesn't need to be destroyed, it simply dissolves when you recognize it for what it is. The same is true for archontic influence. The moment you stop feeding it with unconscious reaction, with identification, with belief in its reality, it loses all power. If you're ready for this awakening, subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss the next chapters of this journey. This knowledge could change everything. Now we arrive at the core, the actual method that Blavatsky encoded in her teachings, the practice the Archons fear most because it requires nothing they can corrupt. Simple, unwavering awareness. Not awareness of something, but awareness itself. The practice is almost offensively simple, which is precisely why it's been overlooked for so long. In our culture addicted to complexity, to techniques and systems and sophisticated practices, the truth hides in plain sight. The method has 3 movements, though they're not really separate. First, observation without judgment. When a thought arises, you don't believe it or reject it, you simply note it. Ah, a thought about fear. Ah, a memory arising. Ah, a desire moving through. You become the scientist of your own consciousness, neutrally observing phenomena without getting swept away by them. This sounds easy. It's not. The Archons have trained you to react instantly, to identify immediately, to be swept away by every wave of mental and emotional content. The second movement, tracing consciousness back to its source. When you observe a thought, you ask, what is it that's observing? You turn awareness back on itself. The Zen masters called this the backward step. Blavatsky described it as withdrawing into the silence. You're not trying to quiet the mind. You're recognizing the silence that already contains the mind. This is crucial. You're not in a battle with thought. You're discovering the space in which thought appears. The third movement, resting as that awareness. Not using awareness as a tool to change your experience, but recognizing awareness as what you are. This is where most seekers get stuck. They use presence as a technique to feel better, to have spiritual experiences, to escape discomfort. The Archons love this because it keeps you seeking, keeps you looking for something other than what is. The liberation Blavatsky pointed to isn't a special state you achieve. It's what remains when you stop trying to achieve anything. Imagine you're watching a movie and suddenly you realize you're not the character on screen. You're the screen itself. The dramas play out, the emotions flow, the stories unfold, but none of it touches what you truly are. The screen is never damaged by the film. The witness is never corrupted by the witnessed. This recognition doesn't make you passive or detached. Paradoxically, it makes you more fully engaged, because you're no longer defending a false identity, no longer manipulated by archontic patterns of fear and desire. Blavatsky warned that this practice would be opposed by every force within your conditioning. Your ego will call it boring, useless, too simple. Your emotions will rebel against the neutrality of observation. Your thinking mind will try to turn it into another concept, another belief, another identity. I am the witness becomes just another thought. The Archons work through these defenses because they know that if awareness stabilizes, if you truly rest as consciousness itself, their entire structure collapses. The ancient texts spoke of the light that drives out darkness. This is that light, simple, present, aware, unavoidable. You can't lose it because it's what's reading these words right now. You can only forget it. And the moment you remember, like this video right now, it helps spread this message that the world desperately needs to hear. Look at your life right now. How much of your day is spent in reactive unconsciousness? You wake up and immediately check your phone, flooding your consciousness with information, stimulation, other people's thoughts and agendas. You go through your day responding to notifications, emails, messages, each one pulling you out of presence, fragmenting your attention into 1,000 pieces. By evening, you're exhausted, and you haven't even noticed that you've been absent from your own life. This is the modern manifestation of archontic control. They don't need mystical rituals or ancient magic. They have social media, 24-hour news cycles, endless entertainment, and the constant promise that the next purchase, the next achievement, the next experience will finally make you feel complete. The Archons have weaponized distraction. They've turned human attention into a commodity, harvested and sold, leaving most people feeling drained, anxious, and disconnected. Blavatsky's method isn't ancient history. It's the antidote to right now. Every time you pause and notice the observer within, you reclaim power from the archontic system. Every moment you choose presence over reaction, you strengthen the divine spark. This isn't about rejecting technology or withdrawing from the world. It's about remembering yourself within it. You can use your phone, engage with media, participate in society, but from a place of conscious awareness rather than unconscious compulsion. Watch what happens when you practice this. Notice how strong the pull is to check your phone, to scroll mindlessly, to fill every quiet moment with noise. That pull isn't coming from you. It's the archontic pattern, the collective unconsciousness that feeds on fragmented attention. The moment you observe this pull without obeying it, something shifts. You feel the space between stimulus and response, the gap where freedom lives. The same pattern plays out in relationships, work, politics, everywhere. The Archons thrive on division, on conflict, on the illusion that people are separate and must fight for limited resources. Every argument where you defend your position without truly listening, every moment you judge another person without recognizing them as consciousness just like you, every time you choose being right over being present, these feed the archontic pattern. But here's the paradox. You don't fight the Archons, you see through them. The moment you bring awareness to a pattern, it begins to dissolve. Not because you're resisting it, but because consciousness itself is light, and light naturally dispels darkness. You don't have to become perfect. You just have to wake up again and again from the trance of unconsciousness. You're at a crossroads that most people never recognize, not because it's hidden in some esoteric teaching or locked behind years of practice. Because it's so immediate, so present, so available, that we overlook it constantly. Right now in this very moment you can choose. Not in some future when you're more ready, not after you've done more work on yourself, not when circumstances finally align. Right now, the choice is simple. Will you believe the archontic lie that you're a limited, separate self struggling to survive in a hostile world? Or will you remember the truth that your consciousness itself, already complete, already whole, witnessing the play of existence without being touched by it? This isn't a philosophical question. It's the most practical choice you'll ever make because it determines the quality of every moment that follows. Blavatsky understood that knowledge without application is just more content for the Archons to distort. She didn't want students who collected spiritual concepts. She wanted practitioners who lived the truth. The method she revealed only works if you actually practice it. Reading about awareness doesn't liberate you. Being awareness does. So here's the challenge. For the next 24 hours, practice the method. Not as a task on your to-do list, but as a living experiment. Every time you notice you're lost in thought, in reaction, in identification, pause. Take one conscious breath. Notice what's aware of the thought. You don't have to change anything. Just observe. Count how many times you remember to do this. not to judge yourself, but to see how deeply the archontic pattern of unconsciousness runs. Most people won't do this. The Archons have a million excuses ready. I'm too busy. This seems too simple. I'll try it later. I need to understand more first. These are all archontic whispers designed to keep you seeking instead of finding, preparing instead of practicing, thinking instead of being. The method is simple precisely because the Archons can't corrupt simplicity. They need complexity, systems, hierarchies, prerequisites. Direct awareness short-circuits their entire operation. What would you choose? Comment below with your honest answer. Would you rather remain comfortable in the familiar prison or risk everything for freedom? I really want to read what you think. The uncomfortable truth is that most people prefer the archontic dream because it's familiar. Freedom is terrifying when you've forgotten what it feels like. But for those rare individuals willing to wake up, willing to practice, willing to remember, everything changes. There's a moment that comes after sustained practice, a moment Blavatsky called the dweller on the threshold. You've been observing, you've been present, you've tasted freedom, and then something shifts. Everything you thought you'd overcome comes rushing back with terrifying intensity. Old patterns you believed were dissolved suddenly grip you again. The progress you thought you'd made seems to evaporate. This is the final test, the last archontic defense mechanism. The Archons can't prevent your awakening, but they have one final card to play. They make you doubt the awakening itself. They whisper, "See? It wasn't real. You're still the same. You'll never be free. This practice doesn't work. You're wasting your time." This voice sounds like your own thoughts, feels like your own doubts. That's the genius of archontic influence. It mimics your inner voice so perfectly that you mistake it for truth. This is where most seekers fall. They believe the doubt. They think the return of old patterns means they've failed. But Blavatsky understood something crucial. This confrontation is actually the confirmation that you're breaking through. The Archons only launch this last defense when they're losing their grip. The intensity of the challenge is proportional to the depth of your awakening. It's not a setback. It's the breakthrough disguised as a breakdown. The ancient texts describe this as the dark night of the soul, the moment when everything spiritual seems to abandon you. But it's actually the opposite. It's the moment when you must choose truth over feeling, awareness over content, presence over the story. If you can maintain observation even here, even in this darkness, even when every cell in your body wants to return to unconsciousness, if you can remain as the witness even now, then the archontic illusion shatters completely. This is what Blavatsky discovered in her deepest initiations. The light isn't something you gain. It's what remains when you stop abandoning yourself to every wave of thought and emotion. The divine spark doesn't need to be kindled. It needs to be recognized even, especially in the darkest moments. When you can observe fear without becoming fear, observe doubt without becoming doubt, observe despair without becoming despair, you've found what the Archons can never touch. The next moment could be your breakthrough or your return to sleep. The choice, as always, is now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. It might be the catalyst for their awakening. The Archons were never gods. They were echoes of forgotten light, patterns crystallized in the descent of consciousness into matter. They thrived on your belief in limitation, fed on your unconscious reactions, sustained themselves through the energy of division and fear. But they always had one fatal weakness. They could only exist where consciousness wasn't looking. Helena Blavatsky's gift to humanity wasn't new information. It was an ancient remembering. You are not the prisoner. You never were. You are the consciousness that can observe even the feeling of imprisonment. The bars of your cage are made of identification. The lock is simply the habit of believing your thoughts without question. And the key is awareness itself. This isn't the end of your journey. It's the beginning of living it consciously. You'll still have thoughts, emotions, challenges, and experiences. But now you know the secret. None of it can touch what you truly are. You are the space in which all experience arises. You are the light that makes all perception possible. You are the divine spark that the Archons could never extinguish because it's prior to their existence. Every time you remember this, the collective dream weakens. Every moment of conscious awareness adds light to the whole. This is the revolution Blavatsky initiated, not a war against darkness, but a remembering of light. The Archons don't need to be destroyed. They simply dissolve when consciousness stops feeding them. If you've made it this far, subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment below what resonated most with you in this journey. Your awakening ripples out into the world, helping others remember. The method is simple. The practice is moment by moment. The freedom is now. You are consciousness itself, reading these words, witnessing this moment, eternally free. Welcome home.